Hey there, whiskey lovers. Welcome to another Whiskey with Isla, and this evening I have something amazing for you guys. I am so excited to do this tasting because not only are we tasting from one of my favorite distilleries, Bruichladdich, but we are doing a head-to-head tasting of their Black Art editions. We've got the edition 4.1 and the edition 6.1 here, and we're gonna give them a try. So Bruichladdich Black Art series is a series of unpeated whiskeys out of their Isla distillery, and they don't reveal anything about the casks that they're matured in, which is super exciting because, you know, it's always kind of fun to play detective. And the really interesting thing about these two is that they were created under different head distillers. So the first one was the legendary Jim McEwen. This was his very last Black Art release for Bruichladdich, the 4.1. The 6.1 was Adam Hannett's second attempt at the Bruichladdich line, and from what I understand, a step up from the somewhat middling 5.1, at least that's what I hear. So we are going to give these a try. Full disclosure, I've had the 6.1 for a little over a year now, so this has been opened and kind of hanging out on my shelf for a while, so that's really going to impact the flavor profile a little bit. Whereas this one I just opened this afternoon. And extra special thank you to the lovely person who sent this my way. So let's start with the 4.1, which I'm so excited to try, and straight up I kind of just want to dive into it. So with the 4.1, we have a whiskey that was distilled in 1990 and bottled in 2003. It is 23 years old, and all it tells you is that it is finished in oak casks. Now, I did some digging, and all the internet will tell me is that it is a mix of American and French oak casks. Aside from that, there's not a whole lot of information out there, and that's because Bruichladdich specifically wants to keep it that way. They want this whiskey to be a mystery. That's the magic of the Black Arts line. So there's the bottle for you. Check that baby out. She's gorgeous. And the other really cool thing about this bottle is that because I picked up the 6.1 in during my trip to Isla, they're actually different sizes. So this is a 750 milliliter, and this one is bottled at cask strength, but at 4.92%. So considering it's a cask strength, it's kind of had some time to chill out. It's not going to knock your taste buds off. So I'm going to give this one a little bit of a nose, and just take a second to look at that color. It's this rich, almost rusty color, just gorgeous. And actually, let's do a quick comparison. So the 4.1 is in my left hand, so I don't remember. So this is the 4.1, this is the 6.1. Quite similar color. I would say that the 6.1 might be a hint darker, but that also could be the light. And there's this almost rosy tint under there a little bit too. It's kind of like, this is gonna sound terrible, but it's kind of like, you know, really rusty bathwater. That kind of color. So let's give it a nose. So right off the bat, I get candy. Tons and tons of candy notes. And specifically, this is reminding me of my trips as a kid to Chinatown to go get these amazing grape chews that they had that I was completely obsessed with. So there's that sort of almost winey note under it, that grapey kind of funk to it. But it's mixed in with this cotton candy sweetness, and it's almost like lime jello, you know, like putting your nose in a bowl of lime jello, lime and grape jello, but in a good way. Some vanilla notes in there too. But this nose is really about the grapes and the sugar. Let's have a little taste. Wow. I mean, right off the bat, the layers of flavor that are unraveling here are a hallmark of the kind of exceptional whiskey that I'm just always so excited to taste. It's right away leaning into that sweetness that it's betraying on the nose, but it's more like a coconut or tapioca pudding. There's a creaminess behind the sweetness, and that grape funk is translating to something more almost like a papaya, you know, like a tropical fruit mixed with cream and sugar. And as it's fading away, it's leaving little whispers of spices, little whispers of that tropical character. I'm gonna go in for another taste. Some salt just on the sides of my tongue. It's really making me salivate, but it's not the alcohol doing that. It's the salt notes and that classic Bruichladdich tang. But the impression that I'm really left with here is just a mouthful full of creamy goodness. It's just leaching into my palate in a way that is really reminding me, yeah, of like a tropical dessert, you know, like a papaya or mango pudding kind of thing. It's just saturating my mouth with those kinds of flavors. Really wonderful stuff. Yeah, and this, even though it's a cask strength, this does not need any water. I mean, you could, but I feel like any water would just blunt the incredible layers of flavor that I'm getting here. And as it's sort of fading away, it's kind of coming full circle back to those grape candies. Like, you know, does anyone remember those cream candies that were really popular in the early 2000s? The Lifesavers Cream Savers. There was a grape one, I think, or I've had like a grape cream candy somewhere. And drinking this is a little bit like the flavor left in your mouth after eating an entire bag of those creamy tropical candies. Like, you know, when you've just gone through the entire bag and you're just sitting there being a kid and not regretting any of your life choices because you're a kid and it's candy. This is that, but in a whiskey. So arguably more fun. Wow. I'm not going to give this a number rating because, as I've mentioned before, I'm not really about that kind of thing, but I will say if you can get your hands on the Black Art 4.1, absolutely do so. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have a little tasting of the 6.1, and we're going to talk about the ways that they're similar, the ways that they're different, and also a little bit about the characteristic quality of a Bruichladdich whiskey, because I would say in my experience, these two are very Bruichladdich-ish, if that makes sense. So I'm just gonna have a little bit of water and we're gonna dive into the 6.1. So as I mentioned before, the 6.1 is Adam Hannett's second go at creating a Black Arts whiskey for a Bruichladdich. The 5.1, to my understanding, and it's the reason why I haven't aggressively chased it, is not the best release out of the Black Arts line. And you know, I think it's absolutely fair that, you know, you're new to the Bruichladdich family. It takes you a minute to sort of find your feet and get that flavor that Bruichladdich fans are looking for. The 6.1 was hailed as a return to form, and funny story, I bought this when I was actually at the distillery, and I had just done three warehouse tastings that day. So by the time I got to the distillery shop, I was, let's just say, not in any condition to be making great buying choices, and I was apparently being followed around by salespeople who were very concerned I was going to drop bottles because I was like, I want them all. I did end up walking away with the 6.1, which slight regrets because a few months later it was released in Canada. So I wasted my my duty-free allowance on something I could have picked up at home, but that's okay because I've enjoyed drinking it ever since, and I'm actually quite a way through the bottle. This is getting low, so I'm glad I was able to do this before I finished it because I come to this one quite often. All right, so let's give this a nose, shall we? Again, that sweetness right off the bat. I would say there's a little bit more of a maritime note hiding in this one. I'm definitely getting more of that briny undertone. This one, in the same way that this one reminded me, that the 4.1 reminded me of grape candy, this one reminds me of candy, but not grape candy. It reminds me of saltwater taffy. Definitely a little brinier on the nose. I'm gonna triple check that. Grapey. Brinier. Yay, my nose doesn't lie. Let's give this guy a taste. And now color-wise, we can see, I think this one is a smidge darker. It's 26 years old, so to be expected. And, oh, I forgot to show you guys the bottle. Sorry. There you go. So it's a 26-year-old. A little darker, a little more time in that cask, and a little lower percentage-wise. So this one is at 46.9, so it's mellowed out a little bit more than the 4.1 as well. Definitely get that mellowing with this one. There is hardly any alcohol burn on this. It's really, it just slips so gracefully down your throat. It's like just dangerously easy to drink. And I'm finding with the 6.1 that classic funk that I would expect from a Bruichladdich comes later. So I got that right away with the 4.1, and I don't know if the delayed action on the funk for this comes because it's been open for a year, or just that's what's going on with the 6.1, but it definitely stages differently in my mouth. With the 4.1, the grapey noted one, the flavor hit me all at once, and then it was like boom, 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 flavor, 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 all the way down my palate. The 6.1 seems to really hit me in more distinct stages. So I take a sip, and immediately candies, raisins, jam. There's a wine note in there, but it's distinctly different than the first one. It's not nearly as grapey. It's more deep red berries and stone fruit. And as it's kind of hanging out of my mouth, I'm getting lots of like muscovado sugar notes developing. That baking spice is still there, but it's definitely receded a little bit, although I'm still getting a hint of cinnamon. And a hazelnuts note is sort of revealing itself. It's definitely more on the back end of my palate than the 4.1. I think it may be a smidge more assertive on the finish than the 4.1 was. Or maybe it's just the intense contrast of this being like flavor, pause, flavor, you know? I would say, in terms of what I'm left with in my mouth, it's not candy in the same way that the 4.1 was candy. When I sipped the 4.1, I had this distinct memory of those tropical fruit Lifesavers cream savers, grapey ones, or maybe they were just tropical flavored, I don't remember. I just remember the packaging and eating an entire bag. This one is nuttier. It's finishing on a nuttier note. It's finishing on a little bit of a saltier note, which I'm a fan of. And and there's not nearly the same hallmark Bruichladdich weirdness going on, which I'm not mad at. It's nice that it's a little bit more muted in this one, but it's definitely more nuts forward for me. It's kind of like the candy is there, but it's a darker sugar. It's more of like a brown sugar. It's almost like a nut brittle. I would say if I had to describe this 6.1 compared to the 4.1, the 4.1 is the bag of Lifesavers cream savers. The 6.1 is a little thing of nut brittle that you've picked up at a local farmer's market and you are munching away at. In terms of deciding which one I prefer, oh my God, you know, is that possible? I don't know. I think these are different whiskeys for different moods. I would say the 4.1 I would reach for if I was craving something to really entice my palate. This one is just so many layers of flavor unraveling themselves in my mouth. It's just kind of amazing how much is going on in this whiskey. The 6.1, I would say I would reach for after a long day when I don't necessarily want to sit there and chew on what's going on in my whiskey. The 6.1 would be my go-to for an evening where I just want something that's going to slide down my throat like, well, I could go on, but I won't. Either way, both of these are fabulous choices to add to your whiskey collection. I know I'm glad I have them. And both of them are fantastic choices, in particular if you're a Bruichladdich fan. I would say the 4.1 is a little bit more emblematic of that Bruichladdich character, that funk, which, as I understand it from my Googling, comes from the butyric acid in the production of the whiskey that shows up in their malting. The 4.1 is definitely more forward on that. So if you're a big fan of those, you know, weird brash flavors in there, that funky, grapey, yeasty, acidy interest, 4.1. If you're like, you know what, every time I've tried Bruichladdich, I wanted to love it, and that's really gotten in the way of my enjoyment of the whiskey, 6.1. And on that note, I think this just about wraps it up. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to review. Send me a message, drop me a line. As always, there will be a much more scandalous version of this review posted to my OnlyFans at onlyisla.com. And happy drinking. Cheers.